Guys, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Today, we're going to have an interview with a really good friend of mine, one of my awesome audio buddies from, as we say here in America, across the pond. So, over in the Netherlands, Jaap from Alpha Audio. And Jaap is actually somebody I respect a lot. I've watched his videos. I used to watch his videos even before I reached out to him. And he really was somebody that, as I started my journey and I started doing my videos on Ethernet switches and digital cables and tweaking, he was really the only person out there in the hi-fi world that was I don't want to say doing something similar because he was clearly steps ahead of me, but really made it okay in my mind to explore and to try and to experiment and have fun doing it. So for that, I will always be eternally grateful to him. And he's just a great guy to chat with. I always enjoy our chats. So I'm going to get right into the chat. We broke it into two parts because we ended up talking for almost an hour. And in this talk, we actually name names. We talk about different hi-fi companies, what we like, what we don't like, what we think is working and not working. So we don't beat around the bush. We have fun and we do it and we talk about things. And I hope you'll watch and enjoy it as well. Thank you. For a while I was running Klipsch Scala speakers, which
Yeah.
were great. And I was running Luxman gear and they always did fine with me.
Yeah.
But now I've upgraded to VAC out of Florida, tube amps, VAC.
I know
And,
them. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm running the stealth cables. And all of a sudden, all I heard was all the flaws in my Klipsch Scala speakers to the point where I just sold them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
That's how it goes.
yeah. And I'm always amazed at the amount of people that say, well, how could your tastes change? I think that if we're being honest with ourselves and the journey, we need to always keep open ears and an open mind to how things change as we change our gear.
Come on. I went from Magnepon to ribbon based loudspeakers to the dynamic ones, berylliums, non berylliums. One, your taste does change because first I wanted to go for as much resolution as possible,
Yeah.
and then I thought, yeah, that's not really fun anymore because you're only listening to minute
Mm-hmm.
details. That's
Mm-hmm.
not listening to music because it has to feel coherent. And if you go too far, the coherence is gone. That's my opinion on it. But my TADs sound a little bit more warm than my vocals. I love them both, they both do some stuff really nice, but it's also about the combination. And I switched my gear when I bought the Sonet Pacitea, the DA converter, and it has so much resolution and the noise floor is so incredibly low that I also started to hear stuff that's not correct.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, it's either the Bryston or it's the Focal. And I thought it's the Bryston, so I switched it for the Pass Labs. But the Pass Labs and the Focal are not friends. It doesn't work. So
The
then I
Path
needed,
Labs and my Klipsch hated each other.
yeah, yeah, but it's not the flow of the Pass.
No, no.
Actually, I noticed that the Pass Labs is so clean and so fast that you hear the loudspeaker just going all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not the most grippy amp there is. The Bryston has a lot more grip, but at the top end, the Pass it has more bandwidth.
Yeah.
So your loudspeaker has to handle that, and the TAD, no issue.
Well,
They
I
are
think
really good friends.
you brought up a good point because for me, where the Klipsch really fell apart is there is a mid bass resonance and
Yeah.
chestiness. And I think that to a large part, that is due to the fact that the cabinets are very large and not well damped.
Oh yeah, that's an issue.
The other thing is they have zero usable output below 75 hertz in my room. And
Really?
because it's a horn loaded woofer,
Hmm.
blending it with my 16-inch SVS sub is extremely difficult. And where what I mean by that is, in order for them to blend well, I have to have the SVS sub at 24 decibel slope, and I have to have it at a very, very, very low frequency crossover, like 33 hertz. And then what happens is you have a suck out because you have this whole area where you've got no. And so by the
Nothing.
time I
Yeah.
find the place where it adds enough, it fills in the bottom end of the clips. At that point, now it sounds even more muddy and more. So I just, when I moved to the stealth cables and everything, I just finally realized I'm beyond the clips, and um, I just needed to move on to something else.
Yeah. 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 It doesn't sound like a very ideal marriage.
No, but I will
Uh,
tell you, when you played the right music, and that leads me to my next point. They were amazing. They were huge sounding, and they were,
yeah.
but that was actually leads me to 2 points. So getting back to what you were just saying about your Bryston and all that and the
Yeah.
music, I think that was one of the biggest aha things that I had heard about the stealth, along with everything sounding much more open. I learned a couple of things about the stealth. First, that prior to that, I was running Siltech, which was my reference cable. And Siltech makes very nice cables. I've got
Yeah.
nothing negative to say about Siltech. What the stealth made me realize is that I had been listening to cables wrong all these years. I always thought a better cable meant more resolution, more air. But one of my reference songs is recorded live with an audience, and I noticed when comparing the Stealth to the Siltech, initially I thought the Siltech, which is not a bright sounding cable at all,
No. No, they're not.
but
No.
I felt as though the Siltech had more information in the audience. And then I realized, compared to the stealth had all that same information. The stealth sounded more natural. And I think there was, compared to the stealth, and the stealth is not a dark sounding cable at all, but there was a slight emphasis on the frequencies on the Siltech, which made it sound like it was more detailed. But that's all it was a turning up of those frequencies. And the stealth rendered the clapping and the yelping and all that just so much more natural. And I realized that when I tried to sit down and do my review of the stealth cables, I literally, the first time after I burn them in, I burn everything in for all my cables get a minimum of 400 hours before I do any critical listening. I found that the first time I sat down after that to listen, I literally could not review. I put the pen and paper down, and I just listened to music for 4 hours because it sounded like music.
Yeah, I recognize that. If you have some gear that just clicks,
Yeah,
you can't write. But that's a good sign.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's what I had with Jung in the studio with the old tannoys as well. We're just having fun, and
Hmm.
that's a good sign. If you're not analyzing all that stuff and listening like, do I hear a difference? I now know if I have to review like that, it's not actually worth it.
I agree,
It
100%. I just want to enjoy the music. I still want, there to be some detail and all that. I'm
yeah.
not looking for something to be completely veiled, but I just want to enjoy the music.
Yeah, but with a good when I was getting into power supplies with the streamer and swapping out power supplies and switch modes and linear power supplies and different, there's a huge difference if you swap them. And I don't have to analyze, is there a difference? There is just a huge difference if you swap the power supply, and that's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to
Hmm.
be a real step up, and with some tweaks, like these decoupling pucks or cable lifters, and people say, yeah, you have to get used to it and then take it away. I just don't believe it. If I don't hear an immediate difference, there is no difference. That's you thinking there is a difference.
Yes.
And yes, I tried cable lifters, and yes, I tried decoupling pucks, and with speakers, obvious difference. I mean, if
Yes.
I use the standard discs or AAI
Hmm.
decoupling mechanism, immediate difference in bass. I don't have to wait for that to happen. It's
Right.
just there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. You're reading my mind because I have a very large, I prefer, I had a custom made Tiger Maple console shelf for my audio gear. I
Yeah.
prefer a longer, wider console type rack. I don't like the tall and narrow. And
No,
again,
no, no,
part of that
no.
is,
Absolutely agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that is because, again, it's in a mixed use room. So I have to get the wife approval. But I was amazed at the sound difference when I added the RevoPods underneath my
Yeah.
gear. I was all of a sudden I realized the terrible sound that the maple wood shelves were
Yeah.
adding to my gear. And what's interesting is I tried isoacoustics, which are more rubber based.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
made the sound worse. And I was talking to my
Yeah.
favorite dealer, and he's like, "What are you talking about? The isoacoustics are great." And I realized it was simply that the rubber on the isoacoustics don't work well with wood shelves.
It can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why
Can
the
be.
RevoPods really made. In fact, I just received from Japan some WellPoint platforms.
I'm actually thinking about the isoacoustics, and you are using it with your preamps, or
I used it. I tried it on the Luxman integrated. I tried it on
yeah,
my Aqua DAC, and I tried
they
it on
don't
the
work with
Screamer.
gear. They work with speakers. They don't work well with gear.
I think you're right.
You know what happens if you have an amplifier? There's a vibrating toroidal transformer
Hmm.
inside.
Hmm.
It vibrates. That creates energy. That energy needs to go out.
That makes sense.
And
Which
if
is why
you
the RevoPods worked.
exactly, and it keeps it in because it's vibrating, but it can't go anywhere. So if you hard couple it with like an AAI that's hard,
Hmm.
and it goes into the puck instead of doesn't need to stay in the amplifier, that's stupid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I think what happens. And I had very mixed results with isoacoustics as well because it doesn't work with a closed speaker like my ATCs that I
Interesting.
run at home because it keeps it in the loudspeaker. And of course, some goes in the rubber and transfers into heat, but a lot of it will stay in the loudspeaker. And if you have a closed system, that energy can't go out. And normally it goes through the spikes into your floor, but then it stays in. It sounded absolutely horrible.
Well, that
It
makes me
was
feel better that I wasn't imagining it.
no, 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 no. This is not imagination. This is actually pretty logic.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and I also think, I love these people who say, "Oh, well, you're psycho, you've tricked yourself and this and that." And I'm thinking, no, because I went in having my dealer, and by the way, I know my dealer is, I love him to death. I know in his experience the isoacoustics have worked, but he's running different
yeah,
gear, he's running different
yeah,
shelves. So, but for me, I went into it expecting something positive, and I came away saying, no, it's a negative, which means
yeah.
I'm being honest with myself.
I always go in blind. I just,
Yeah.
what happens, happens. And some people say, yeah, your stories about filters are bullshit and cables are bullshit. I'm actually measuring the stuff. You can see the difference, but hey, let's not go there.
Yeah.
Uh, they bought you. Uh, who's buying me?
Yeah.
That's stupid.
I, I-
It,
I'm I'm not, nobody's paying me for this stuff.
no, but there's no one paying me for doing my lab videos as
Exactly.
well.
Exactly.
That's
I
they were not
It
even
costs me
sponsors.
money to do this. It costs you to do this. I'm not making money off of this, and I know you're not.
Well, I do, but I have
But
advertisers.
you
But
know what I mean by this. You're not getting paid for it.
no, I'm not getting paid for reviews, and I'm not getting paid for videos as well. And
Yeah.
you can see who's advertising on my website. They're running banners,
Yeah.
display advertising. So there's no secrecy.
Yeah.
I'm even thinking of putting a list with sponsors on my website just to see those are my sponsors,
Hmm.
and you can see that I review a lot of gear that from not sponsors
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And but that's a discussion you will never ever win, because
Yeah,
they
but these
think,
are the people you're up against people, and I don't want to go down this path, but you're up against people that
no,
think businesses are evil and
yeah,
marketing is evil, and there's just no talking to those people. So I don't even waste my time anymore.
no, me neither. I stopped even replying to them,
Yeah.
just like you
And I'm
did.
okay with the difference of opinion. That's healthy. I love that. But if you're going to
Yeah.
be ridiculous, I'm not going to waste my time.
Yeah, but I noticed on the live streams, most people that actually view and comment are pretty positive about the transparency, and they like listening in with us and stuff like that. It's not those people are not commenting on those videos anyway, so I'm pretty happy with that. And it's a lot of fun to see the comments, and they're they're hearing the same as you are,
Hmm.
but everyone has a different taste.
Yeah, yeah.
That,
You're
that,
right.
that-
I had a gentleman. I did my series on $30 switches and how good
yeah,
could $30 switches sound. And I found that when you did a certain combination of $30,
yeah,
two $30, and it worked out better than other, which I thought was fascinating. I actually had somebody, I'll never forget this. He posted, he said, I'm an electrical engineer and everything you say is not electrically correct. So I went out to Amazon and I bought this $30 switch, and oh my God, it made a huge difference. I have no idea why, but I can't believe you're right. And I was like, this just made my year.
yeah. I had the same guy. There was some sort of comment like that as well. I was like, wow. He said,
Yeah.
I'm
I was
into
like, thank you
IT for
for
40
listening to your
years,
ears.
and it doesn't make any sense, but I tried it, and holy shit, it made a lot of
Yeah,
difference. Like, thank you.
exactly. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
keep going back to this. A couple of years ago, I didn't know if I read all these forums and everybody was like, well, USB cables can't make any difference. It's ones and zeros, which by the way is factually incorrect, and that
yeah,
switches can't make a difference. And so you know what I did, and you and I talked about this last time. I decided for myself, I'm going to stop listening to both sides. I'm going to go buy the stuff myself, and I'm going to see if I can hear a difference. And
yeah,
I genuinely went into it thinking there was going to be no difference. I admit it. I thought it can't. Wow, does it make a difference?
yeah. But it's the same as with a network. I mean, it's not about the ones and zeros; it's about the noise,
Yes,
and and that's
and
what
that's
we
what the
all.
stealth cables do. With their collar, it's fighting the interference and the noise.
Yeah, but that's is it a speaker cable or is it a power cable?
They
That
have
was,
power, speaker, and interconnects, USB. The
yeah.
USB and the Ethernet were a massive difference.
Yeah, I had this funny experience with AAI creates cables as well. It's a producer in Czechoslovakia or
Hmm.
something, and they um, they had this Ethernet cable, and I still can't figure out why. It made a huge difference. It really sounded different,
Yeah,
and I can't explain. It's really weird. I mean, yeah, you have some differences in Ethernet cabling. I don't review them because it's really hard and it's very, very dependent on your system. But I did try it because I had a whole bunch of their cables, including speaker cables and power cables. And I didn't like the speaker cable, but the Ethernet cable was really, really good.
yes,
And it made the biggest difference I ever heard in an Ethernet cable.
yeah.
And I still can't explain how. It's
Well,
it's it's weird.
it's interesting because for me, cables were a necessary evil. I always
Yeah,
was kind of annoyed having because there's I've listened to hundreds of different cables. There's so many different, and it's interesting because I've reached a point now where I'm no longer going to do videos on other cables because I know for me, I've tried the inexpensive stealth, I've tried the medium price, I've tried the very expensive. There is
yeah.
no cable I've ever heard in my system that comes anywhere close to stealth. So I feel like because I've found what I love more than anything else and that works great for me, it's almost unfair to try anything else. And now I can focus on other components. I'm going to be doing a series of videos on vibration control, the well
Yeah.
points. I've got a unique, a new one coming from Switzerland. I'm going to be trying. I'm seeking out, and I love
You're
I'm
really
trying to
into
get a pair
tweaking.
of acoustical treatments from Japan. I'm
Yeah.
really trying these. I hate to say smaller brands, but not the mass market brands. And I really think that's where the innovation is. That's the fun stuff. Searching and
I agree.
finding this, like even stealth, only the ultra high end people know about stealth.
Yeah,
But it's
true.
amazing.
Yeah, someone asked me on my website, yeah, why don't you review stealth? Is there a reason? And no, there's no reason. It's just not really available in the Netherlands. That's
Yeah.
the whole point. But I would love to try their stuff. But you're really into tweaking. You don't
Yes.
really review like amplifiers or loudspeakers, or I mostly see tweaks.
Yeah, and because, and I actually did a video where I said you're upgrading your system wrong. And what I realized is when I learned like how good the Luxman could sound and the other stuff, that with the RevoPods, with the cable upgrades, with the that I was getting, and it was when I did the power cable. We also tried a Griffin amplify integrated and a Constellation integrated. And the Griffin and the Constellation are like twice the price of the Luxman. The
Yeah,
Luxman with the stealth cables cost significantly less than the Griffin and the Constellation with the Siltec cables. And the Luxman with the stealth cables beat them all. When I ran the same level of cables on the Luxman, then the Griffin and the Constellation were better. So my point is, if you do the tweaks right for your system, you don't need to spend, and I say this with an asterisk, you don't,
yeah,
the better answer isn't always to spend more on gear.
not true. True. It's about the balance in the system
Yeah, because like
and
even,
knowing
we
what
talked about this,
we.
my Telegartner switch, it's an $8,000 switch. It
Yeah,
still sounds noticeably better, and there's a 5 meter run from the wall over to the switch. My system still sounds better, noticeably better, when I run my magical three $30 switches over by the wall and then run the 5 meter to my Telegartner. Sounds noticeably better than without those three switches.
really.
Yes. And the other thing I tried is those switches sound noticeably better when I plug them into a $299 AudioQuest power conditioner that I had laying around that's 15 years old. That's a better sound than if I upgrade the power supplies on the switches and simply plug them into the wall.